My name is Byrone Babione. I'm
Okay.
an attorney with the Alliance Defending Freedom. I represented the O'Reillys in their case and have represented many people or religious business owners that have fallen under the hard fist of the sexual orientation laws and how
Speak close to the microphone.
and how same-sex marriage affects that. Like I said, I'm an attorney with Alliance Defending Freedom. We're the largest legal alliance. We fight for religious liberties, our first freedoms. We're involved in the courts through training and education. I'm one of the attorneys for the Hawaii Family Forum in the Jackson versus Abercrombie case, which is at the Ninth Circuit, in which Hawaii's marriage law hangs in the balance. There, of course, the governor and the plaintiffs are asking the court to strike down Hawaii's marriage laws, and they will have to overcome the federal district court's decision, which eloquently defended marriage and why the state has the strongest interest in protecting marriage between a man and a woman. And as I've said before, we are involved in these cases, and I just want to talk a little bit about how same-sex marriage works in conjunction with sexual orientation discrimination laws and how that comes down and has a burden on people of faith that run businesses and organizations and bring their faith to it. With the arrival of same-sex marriage, Americans have been told that religious freedoms must give way. This movement for fundamental change in marriage is not just about granting same-sex marriage and then we'll all be peace and that will be the end of it. It is naive, of course, to think that aside from redefining marriage, nothing else changes. No serious person accepts that. What it will mean is the ascendancy in public policy and culture of the view that there has never been anything special about marriage between a man and a woman, that children don't need a mom and a dad, they just need an adult or some combination of adults. It is also about delegitimizing the idea that child rearing is done best in most cases when it is done by the mother and father that together brought the children into the world. For the first time in the history of civilization, public policy is now permitting and condoning the idea that it is just as well to deprive children of either their mother or their father. That's what same-sex marriage does, doesn't it? It deliberately deprives a child of either his father or mother. And if you're not willing to lend your time, talent, your business to that idea, then you're going to be labeled a bigot, deserving of punishment under the processes of the state. And it's this point that I would like to illustrate. I'm going to talk about Jim and Mary O'Reilly, who own the Wildflower Inn. In the bucolic Vermont countryside, Jim and Mary O'Reilly operate Wildflower Inn, a family-owned bed and breakfast. For many years, operating in a state that legally recognizes same-sex unions, the O'Reillys, a committed Catholic family, had an established business practice when approached by anyone asking the inn to host an event celebrating a civil union. At that time, civil unions were legal in Vermont. And that approach was to be very upfront and to say, listen, we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. We're very committed Catholics. We want you to know that. We think it's important that you know that before you have your civil union ceremony here or celebrate it here. We want to be upfront with that, and it's important for us to tell you that. We are not going to prevent you from having your ceremony, but we want you to know that. The Human Rights Division of Vermont said, you know, that's okay, because you're not really discriminating. You're just saying what your position is on it. And that was in 2005. But 2 years after same-sex marriage passed in the state in 2011, the ACLU teamed up with the Human Rights Commission, the same entity that had told the O'Reillys years before that it's okay if you tell people where you're coming from. And they teamed up with them and they brought a lawsuit against the Wildflower Inn for this very same policy of telling people that, hey, we're a committed Catholic family. We put our time, our energy into promoting marriage between a man and a woman. It's a sacrament in our faith. We want you to know that. But they were sued for telling that to people, not for denying them access to the end, but just for telling them that. And they were dragged under and into the administrative world of human rights commissions. And after a long bout of litigation, they got to the point where their business had been beaten down. They had been run down in the press constantly. There was a huge campaign run against them, and they were barely hanging on to their business. And so they settled with the other side. They ended up paying thousands of dollars, $30,000, because what was their crime? They had told these people that they were committed Catholics that believed that marriage was between a man and a woman. And so the expression of their religious beliefs came at a great cost after Vermont passed same-sex marriage in that state and put the state's anti-discrimination laws on steroids. This case was not about access to service. I highlight that it was about them speaking and communicating their position about marriage. But that didn't stop the machinery of the state. And this is not the only story like this. The O'Reillys didn't discriminate based on sexual orientation. They had clients and customers that engaged in homosexual practice, identified as homosexuals. But once same-sex marriage passed, it was no longer permissible to say, listen, I'm not against people that practice homosexuals. I'm not a bigot against them. I'll serve them. But what I can't do as a Catholic is I can't participate in a ceremony that mimics marriage but is fundamentally different and violates my religious faith. You might think that this is isolated, but we deal with inquiries like this all the time. People are calling us all the time. They're threatened, if photographers and people that are in the service industries, that part of their business is to provide a communicative service. And they're threatened with lawsuits if they say, look, on the basis of my faith, I can't print that T-shirt that promotes a gay pride or promotes homosexual behavior. We have a case like that in Kentucky where there's a T-shirt company that would not print a T-shirt that said Lexington Pride, which was the gay pride festival there. And they politely told them, they said, listen, we're Christians, we'll print you all kinds of T-shirts, we'll do all kinds of services, but we can't promote that because that really runs counter to our religious faith. And the owner, Blaine Adamson, said, listen, I'll hook you up with another printing company at the same cost. He called up a friend. They said, sure, we'll do that. And that's all that happened there. Well, that wasn't enough, because after he did that, he was sued, and he's been now in litigation for a year simply because he exercised his right to say, listen, I cannot participate or perform a service in which I am communicating and I am promoting something that runs counter to my religious faith. There is in New Mexico, John and Elaine Huguenin. They own a photography company. They are the nicest, most well-mannered people you would meet. Elaine is the principal photographer of the company, and her main or specific thing that she does is wedding photography, and she's one of the best in the state. And she was asked several years ago now, well, many years ago now, because it's still in litigation, 5 or 6 years ago, she was asked to photograph a same-sex commitment ceremony. And she politely told them, she said, listen, I'm a Christian, and I can't use photography, which is an artistic expression of me, to communicate a particular event that runs counter to my deepest held religious beliefs about marriage. And she was sued, and she was ordered by the administrative tribunal in New Mexico to pay the plaintiff's attorneys $7,000 attorney's fees. And then she's gone through the long litigation of going through the New Mexico court system, in which she has lost all the way, and in which the courts are rejecting the claim that, hey, I have a First Amendment right to not communicate a message. Just as you have a First Amendment right to communicate any message, you also have First Amendment rights not to communicate a message. And this is clear as day. But this all changes with civil unions and same-sex marriage and the anti-discrimination laws. And we are told, in fact, the former commissioner of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Kai Feldblum, that President Obama appointed, and her term just ran up in the summer. But when she was asked about this, hey, what's going to happen when religious faith comes into conflict with same-sex marriage? And her answer was, you know, that's a tough question, but religious faith is going to have to give way. So what we have here is our first liberties, you know, what the liberty that this country was founded on, and that the whole idea of the Bill of Rights started with, our right to the free exercise of religion, our right to speak what we want to, our right to be free from compelled speech, must now give way to this new movement to create a right of same-sex marriage and a right to basically not be offended with respect to your sexual orientation. So John, the Huguenons, Elaine Photography is the name of the company. Their case, they lost at the New Mexico Supreme Court, and they're now appealing to the United States Supreme Court. And I could go on and on with stories, and I have them here, and I know that my time is limited. But one of the things that I really want to point out here is that it's not just, okay, there's same-sex marriage. Now there is a premium on making sure that same-sex marriage filters in and through the policies of the state and the culture. Of course that happens. But what also is happening is that if you oppose that in some way, not only are you a bigot, but you're somebody that needs to be punished. So if you refuse something that I want you to affirm or confirm with respect to my sexual orientation, that's going to be discrimination, and that's going to be violating the state's anti-discrimination law, and you're to be punished for it. And that is exactly what is happening. But it's not just the fact that you have a dispute and you can say, well, we got to let the courts sort it out. Surely the courts are going to recognize the religious freedoms of people and their rights, the right to free speech. But even if that happens in the long run, when you get through these cases, and by the way, very few of them end that way, most of them end with the business being run down and they throw in the towel because they're trying to hang on not only to their business, but they're trying to hang on to their personal lives in some of these cases. But it's that journey of going through litigation to try to defend your right to be who you are, to say what you want to say. And it is a long, hard journey. When you get sued, it is a difficult process and it takes a long time. And whenever it involves same-sex marriage pitted against somebody's free exercise of religion, you take a beating in the media of it, and the other side is they're organized such so that they really make it difficult on you, and that process is just a long, brutal process. So I say all this to say that you have to be extremely, well, let me put it this way. You need to be forewarned that when a state passes same-sex marriage, you're not just changing the redefinition of marriage, you're changing the way things are going to operate and the way things are going to work. And the downside of that is that the burden always falls on people of faith. And people of faith are being sued, and they're being dragged into administrative courts, and they're basically being punished if they don't participate or facilitate in same-sex marriages or in the legitimization of those relationships. I can tell some more stories, but I don't want to overextend my time.
There's a wonderful testimony. Richard, do you have any questions?
I just have a quick question. This is an observation that I've made with countries that have passed same-sex marriage, they attach when they're dealing with poor developing nations who believe in traditional marriage, they attach their concepts of marriage to a lot of the foreign aid that they give to these smaller, poorer countries. For example, New Zealand has cut all foreign aid to the Kingdom of Tonga, right? And what that has done internationally is because they have these traditional values, it pushes these nations closer and closer to China and other countries that are not necessarily friendly towards the United States. And that seems to be the trend even nationally with the United States, is that just like how we have this issue, they're now going internationally and waving their finger at these other nations who don't believe, who have traditional values, and are starting to isolate and persecute these countries based on their belief in certain traditional values. Does that just run similar with?
Yes, it's entirely consistent with what I'm saying. Look, the United States is unique, or it has always been unique. It was founded on the idea that Almighty God created the mind free. In other words, you had the right to conscience. You could disagree with the king. You could oppose the king to his face. We were a country of disagreeers. We can argue. We can disagree. We don't have to support each other. We can support each other. That was the great genius of the United States, and that is what allowed people to live together. The irony of that, by allowing a lot of conflict and not punishing people for it, is people end up getting along better that way. But that idea is lost, and what we have now is coercion, the government forcing people to submit and to believe a certain way about human sexuality. And there's a lot of political money in that. And now you see this internationally. So it's a form of coercion that comes through state non-discrimination laws, the enactment of same-sex marriage, attaching strings to foreign aid, or conditions to foreign aid, a form of what we used to call political extortion.
Right.
Absolutely, those things are similar. And that's what we have here. And the end game is this. The end game is you can keep those beliefs, but you can keep them in the closet. And if you bring them out here, we're going to punish you for it. Now, when I look at Hawaii's same-sex marriage bill, I'm just going to be very frank as a lawyer that actually deals with real people who end up getting persecuted when same-sex marriage is passed in states, and as I said before, puts anti-discrimination laws on steroids. I mean, the law is appalling. I mean, the religious exemptions are embarrassing. They're so ridiculously narrow, they hardly protect anything. They protect a pastor. A pastor doesn't have to participate in a wedding ceremony. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for almost nothing. We know that. What else does it do? Well, a church doesn't necessarily has to solemnize a marriage on its property, so long as the public doesn't come on the property, or so long as you don't get any money, that you don't get the envelope from the bridegroom. I mean, what is that? I mean, what about people of faith that own businesses? I'm telling you, you don't go to work and have to leave your faith at the door. You can operate your business. It's your business, and you should be able to operate it according to your faith. And they're saying, no, you can't. They're saying, we'll destroy that business, and we'll punish you with fines until you get with the program. And I'm not exaggerating here. I'm a real lawyer that deals with real people that cry and have their relationships strained and have their businesses beat down. This happens in real life. And like I said, I can keep going because I got pages of it. And last week, I just talked to 3 other people calling up. And of course, I can't reveal their names, but one is a book illustrator. I've been illustrating books, great artist. Been doing this for years. Now they want me to do a book that promotes homosexuality. I can't do that. They're threatening to sue me. What should I do? What happened to America? Go get another illustrator. Let me be free. to pursue what I want to pursue, and you be free to pursue what you want to pursue. That's not what the new regime is about, and that's not what same-sex marriage is about.
Karen?
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Do you know of any cases where these businesses who would like to exercise their religious rights had overcome those adversities? Any cases?
Not many. I'm going to tell you about one, and it was still, even though their rights were vindicated, they suffered a brutal beatdown getting there. I'm going to tell you about Julia Ward, who was a student at Eastern Michigan University. And Julia is, one of the finest people you could ever meet. Very gracious, very eloquent, and very elegant. And she was in the counseling program there at the school. And as part of earning your counseling degree, you had to participate in a practicum. And so what that basically means is you're practicing counseling. And so people would come in for counseling, and you would give that to them. And this was in preparation of you earning your degree and going out in the world and counseling people. She had a lesbian was sent to her and wanted to be counseled basically about how to improve her relationship with her partner. And without, even bringing it up, Julia went to basically her teacher, who had supervisory authority, and said, listen, I can't do this because in my religious faith, I can't facilitate that type of religion. That would be wrong. Can I get another counselor to help her out? And that's what they did. And of course, that was part of the policy, right? Because if you're a counselor, there's all kinds of reasons, all kinds of ethical reasons why you shouldn't counsel a particular person or a particular group of people. This is part of that system. And Julia was saying, not only can I not do this as a matter of my faith, it would be unethical, because at the end of the day, my heart's not going to be in this one, okay? Well, she thought that was that, but it wasn't. The school came back against her and told her that she was going to have to drop her religious faith with respect to that problem, and she was going to have to counsel people that were in same-sex relationships and help them in those relationships, even though that ran counter to the faith. And this got nasty. I mean, this got to where she was being pulled in front of members of the faculty, and they were getting her involved in a theological bout and questioning her theology, and asking her if she thought her particular brand of Christianity was better than other brands. It was ridiculous. And they put her through this, and she was not allowed to continue the program. And I mean, she was 13 credit hours away and had stellar grades. Now, she brought suit, and she had to fight that way through the federal court, and fortunately, but the lower court didn't agree with her, but she had to go to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals was a panel, and I just want to tell you, I'm not saying that this is typical, but they were a panel that was really taken aback by this, and they said, this is wrong. You can't do this. The school can't coerce people into giving up their religious beliefs just because they want to be a counselor. So it took a long time. Julia went through a lot. It was very stressful. It was very difficult. She had to change schools. She ended up becoming a counselor. But as you can see, nobody should have to run that gauntlet of persecution merely because you disagree about a point of human sexuality. So that's the only case I can think of at the moment.
Yes, I have two questions. The Vermont case, the bed and breakfast, is not that strange in that in my district, in Hawaii Kai, a similar suit was filed. And it would be nice to get an update if anybody in the room knows anything about it. Do you?
Yeah, I can, and so can Jim. That's one of the
Is there anything that's
stories.
allowable to be said? Because I guess it's still.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, Phyllis Young owns. Jim, do you want to jump up here and talk about it too? Jim is litigating that case as well. Well, Phyllis Young, basically, she owns a home here in Hawaii. It's her personal home. that she lives in with her husband, and to pay the mortgage, they rent sometimes up to 3 of the rooms, one to up to 3 of the rooms. And this is their personal home, okay? This isn't an inn, this isn't a hotel. And she was basically asked by a lesbian that, hey, my partner and I want to come and stay in your home. And she politely said, listen, we're people of faith. This is our personal home. We do lend out some of the rooms, but we can't do that. And she was sued as well, and that litigation is ongoing. You want to add anything to that, Joe?
Well, yeah, what's amazing is when you go through the administrative process at the Civil Rights Commission, they have a conciliation process where they try to get the parties to settle, okay? And these were the terms that the Youngs were offered. Pay $20,000 and put signs up inside your home that says you will never discriminate on these grounds again. We got up and walked out, okay? That's what you're dealing with.
Oh my God.
Right.
And the other really kind of tragic part about the story is they were sued under the Public Accommodations Law, Chapter 489, which is for hotels, motels, and other places of transient accommodation. That was the part of the Public Accommodation Law that was applied to her home. But there happens to be a second anti-discrimination law that was more applicable to her home. It's Chapter 515, which is discrimination in real estate transactions. And that law actually passed by this body, the legislature, provided that if you lived in your home and you rented 4 or fewer rooms, you were completely exempt from the non-discrimination provisions. So we defended the Youngs at the Civil Rights Commission with that and constitutional protections, and the Civil Rights Commission took the position that the Public Accommodations Law applied, and then instead of rendering a ruling that we could appeal if we didn't like, they allowed the plaintiffs to file lawsuit in court. So they filed the lawsuit in court, and on the same day that the complaint was filed, the Civil Rights Commission filed a motion to intervene as plaintiffs against the Youngs. So before the Youngs were even served with the complaint, the state of Hawaii was joining the case against them. So we had motions for summary judgment at the trial court. They were arguing Chapter 489 applied. We were arguing Chapter 515 applied, and she's exempt. The judge actually ruled that 489 applied, believe it or not, even though she's not a public building. The definition of bed and breakfast home in the City and County of Honolulu zoning code excludes bed and breakfast homes from transient accommodations. So that actual ruling is on appeal right now before the Intermediate Court of Appeals. We filed our opening brief. The other side's going to file their brief in the next month or so.
Okay, so we don't have to go to Vermont to see a real live example.
You also you might know this, but civil union refusal has led to a church being sued at the Civil Rights Commission. But the problem is that's a confidential proceeding. So nobody knows about the first 3 years of these cases because they're confidential until they get into the court system, and then they're public.
Given what you said about the bed and breakfast, I don't know if I should revise my question or still ask it, because I was getting the impression as you were speaking that under the civil unions there was a live and let live tolerance, and then after the same-sex marriage came in, it kind of like made the dividing lines of divisiveness and...
Yeah, no, it was a mixed bag when you had civil unions. But when you get same-sex marriage, it's not a mixed bag. It's full on. It's full on. There's no tolerance for people of faith and who actually bring their faith and can't provide a service in which they'll be communicating something that violates their sincerely held religious beliefs.
And you know, in the
So.
Julea Ward case, the Sixth Circuit opinion actually said tolerance is a two-way street. Otherwise, the government is issuing orthodoxy on the issue. And that's what it is.
I've got a question for you. The First Amendment is, with regard to speech, is very broad. In fact, it includes flag burning, which is an action, not a speech, right? I mean, it's very, very broad, and rightly so, for our freedom of expression. It seems here, would you agree that the freedom of religious expression is being construed? First of all, your testimony is breathtaking. Breathtaking.
I could go on.
I mean, I hear this stuff. He's talking about religious exemptions all the time, and and then I hear these stories. It's breathtaking. It really is. I did not know this. I'm so glad you came, because I didn't know it was this bad. So, would you say the religious freedom, religious expression is construed rather narrowly? These cases, what you say to me, shouldn't even be in court.
Of course they shouldn't be. No, they shouldn't be. But what makes them, what gives them the cloak of legitimacy, and hopefully that it won't prevail, but what gives them the cloak of legitimacy is same-sex marriage. When you legitimize it, then to oppose it is discrimination. And if you oppose it as a business or somebody that's a covered entity under a public accommodation law, then it becomes discrimination. Well, of course it's not. It's you exercising your right to disagree and speak out against something and not have to participate in promoting a message.
Is the conflict between this long-established right, clearly articulated in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and this newly formed right, and here you have this clash, and religion seems to be, the freedom of expression seems to be losing. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is, and it's very interesting when if you look at, when you look at same-sex marriage regimes and the whole sexual orientation, anti-discrimination statute, the people that are always losing are the people of faith. Something's wrong with that.
Yeah.
When our first liberty is the free exercise of religion.
Okay, let's close it up here. Let's drill back home. You've had a chance to look at the recent drafts, maybe. I know you've looked at the original bill. Do you agree that this legislation fails to adequately protect the photographer, the shopkeeper, I mean, it's a rhetorical question.
It's obvious. It's appalling.
Yeah, there's really no protection.
No.
And with regard to the religious, for the sanctuaries and the pastors and the preachers, I've brought this scenario up. Tell me if, based on your reading of this, that within 5 years, two men could go to a church and say, we want to get married, and the Father Teddy would be there. Well, we love you. You're precious human beings. You're members of our flock. It goes against our catechism. We can't marry you. Thank you. They'll go sue, and we'll get a judge here, and he'll say, you know what? You can do whatever you want inside those doors, your magic show, whatever, but I can no longer enfranchise you with the civil authority to conduct a marriage because you are engaging in discrimination. So you can call it whatever you want, but I can no longer give you that civic label because the state can't be party to that.
Right.
Is that a stretch?
No, it would be naive to think otherwise. It would be naive to
think otherwise.
That's not going to happen.
Okay. Well, I'm called naive a lot around here, just so you know.
Yeah. No, I mean, think about it. If you look at the exemptions in the current bill, I mean, when I say they're appalling, they say, well, a church won't have to solemnize same-sex wedding in their facilities as long as they don't do it for a profit. But it doesn't protect them, does it, if somebody wants to have the reception at the church, does it? You see that? Yeah. So what they do is they bring out, two little gimmies, and it's really a dog and pony show to make you think that they gave you religious freedom.
Let me ask you a question. I was at a church today inside the sanctuary for a legislative briefing held by one of my Democratic colleagues who I respect and admire. I was served food. I didn't have to pay for it. I got to use the restroom. And no religious service took place. It was a legislative briefing. Is that now a public accommodation?
Well, I'd have to take a hard look at your public accommodation law, but...
I mean, it's not a church service. So he's opened it up to other venues now.
Yeah, sure.
So the point is he's opened it up to non-religious...
Arguably.
Arguably.
Yeah.
He's opened it up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you so very much. This is breathtaking.
Could I just finish with this? Here's the solution to this problem, and I know it's difficult. Don't pass same-sex marriage.
Thank you very much.